Fantastic. Hi. I love technology. Not. All right.
You're going to be an expert in this stuff in about 15 minutes.
I should probably try it more than once every 2 years. All right, so now here's our brief introduction.
So lots of hummingbirds here.
Lots of hummingbirds. How many species, Eric? 132 species we counted.
Wow.
Oh, we didn't count them. They have been counted for us. Lots of all other brilliant babies as well, and interesting birds. And
What was that? That brown one.
We'll be back to all of these birds
Oil bird.
eventually. All birds.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're back to just regular pictures. So our home near the Quito airport was Hotel San Jose de Puembo, Puembo just being the name of the town. But it's a nice convention hotel with fabulous facilities and gorgeous roses, for which Ecuador is well known. So the, excuse me, left is a view of some of the grounds, and to the right is the view out over the farm behind the park. This is Ron chilling on the porch of our little bungalows that we started out in. And good food. I always like a little potty humor to lighten the day a little bit. These look like where you want to go when you have that problem. So some of the regular birds at San Jose, rufous collared sparrow and vermilion flycatchers. Oops. Back up here. Back up here. Great thrush and eared dove, which looks like very familiar to our mourning dove. Sounded a little bit different. And then we ran into a little problem. Ron got visited by the test takers and got to quarantine for COVID. So he had to stay at the hotel while the rest of us got to head out. Some familiar and some unfamiliar shopping places from LA with love. Fascinating graffiti. Almost everywhere there was a wall, there was graffiti, and some of it quite ornate and some of it pretty typical. We did, Eric and Lauren and I took a little trip down to the Quito Botanic Garden, and our taxi driver didn't quite understand where we wanted to go. So we ended up by the cathedral, but finally ended up at the garden, and which was lovely and had some really fascinating plants, not as many birds as we'd hoped for. Oh, Eric says go back to the fuchsia. That is the fuchsia. Yeah, this is a fuchsia too. There's so many. Fuchsias are amazing. I usually think of just the simple ones that we see, but there's lots of them. We had a lovely time, but you can imagine a hummingbird with a long bill would enjoy the flower on the left there. And the flower on the right, the fuchsia arborescens, we saw a number of places in Costa Rica as well, and is very popular with a lot of the birds. And coming back, we ran into some traffic. These are our guides. On the left is Diego Andrade, and on the right is Edison Buenino. I can't quite say his name. Edison was our guide, and Diego is his co-owner of Sword-Billed Expeditions, and they were the ones who took care of us when we needed taking care of. So driving back out of Quito, and past all the interesting sights you see along the way, we finally get out of the city. So we're ready to go see some birds, except we ran into mud. We ran into mud that stuck our bus. And Edison said it was the first time in 25 years of leading birding trips that he's had that particular problem. And a number, as you can see, a number of gentlemen saying that those are locals who just came and on their motorcycles and tried to help by shoveling rocks and stuff, but apparently ultimately they got a tractor to come and push the bus out. But so then we were going to walk the 2 kilometers to our destination, which was Reserva Azuro Loma. And fortunately our host came down in his motorcycle and gave 3 of us rides back up to the reserve. And the intrepid hiked the final kilometer on their own. So he had a number of hummingbird feeders up, and you just get so fascinated by the hummingbirds, you forget to look up, but we'll show you some lookups in a moment. We have buff-tailed coronet. This is one of Eric's target birds. So one of the reasons for the whole trip for him was to see the sword-billed hummingbird again. And as you can see, its bill is longer than the whole body. It's a pretty spectacular bird. And it can even use the feeders, though that obviously can't perch. So here's Eric and his, oops, oh, fiddlesticks. Okay, here is Eric. Where'd Eric go? There's Eric. Maybe he was here somewhere. Look, he's got a sword bill in his hand. So that was a thrill. We all got to sit and have the birds. Oops, we're going to do it again. No, we didn't want that. Alrighty, and the sparkling violet ear was a common hummingbird that we saw. They obviously you can see the sparkles, and sometimes they'll flash their violet ears at you. The black-tailed train bearer was seen here as well, just amazing long tail, but obviously you can see the 2 middle pictures a lot more flexible than it looks like it should be. Bananas were a big draw for tanagers and guans on the right there. This is the Andean guan. And these are some of the birds, if you can tear your eyes away from the hummingbirds, some of the birds you can look up and see. We have blue-capped tanagers, barred fruit eaters, yellow-breasted brush finches, 3 species just at this one side of flower piercers. What flower piercers do, I mean, they'll drink honey like it's, sugar water like it's going out of style, but they'll actually pierce the base of the flower and get the nectar out of there. And it's a very efficient system. You don't have to have a big long bill. The collared Inca, a very elegant hummingbird. Sapphire vented puff leg. And they took us for a little walk where we saw our first ant pitta. And this is the Ecuadorian ant pitta. Ant pittas are a little ground, no, actually they can be actually fairly good size. They're ground dwelling birds that are usually very secretive, and you're very, very lucky if you see one, unless you go to one of the reserves that has gotten some cooperative birds who are willing to come, as you can see along the log here, to worms and come for us to get a really good look at them. And I think they look a little bit like eggs on sticks, but they're kind of neat looking birds. So we stayed for a couple of 3 nights at the Septimil Paraiso, which I guess I understand means 7th heaven. It was a lovely lodge with beautiful rooms and fantastic upholstery on the furniture. And there was still a little mud on the window of my seat. So we went to the Refugio Paz de las Aves. And our first, this is just a scenic view from one of their blinds, but we went down a muddy trail. I shouldn't say a muddy trail. All the trails were muddy, but we went down a muddy trail to a blind where we saw Andean cock of the rocks. I think there were 4, as basically a lek. There were, I think, 4 males displaying, and they would pop around and show off a little bit. They were a little farther away than I would have ideally liked, but it was still spectacular to see them, and got our morning off to a good start. Then we met the dark-backed wood quail, who likes bananas. And this is our first glimpse of Maria, the giant ant pitta. Maria is probably the most famous ant pitta in the world. She was the first to be, I wouldn't say tamed, but maybe habituated to coming to worms. And it's a lot of fun because our 2 guides, Angel and Rodrigo, would go, vinga, 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 and Maria would come because she knew vinga, vinga meant worms, worms. So this is a close-up of Maria. She stands probably, but 10 inches tall or so. But the right-hand picture, you can, actually both these pictures, she looks like an egg on sticks, but that was really cool to see her. And then we went back up to have some breakfast and watch the birds have breakfast. So we had some more banana mania with the crazy birds going after the bananas. Flame-faced tanagers are one of the brightest and prettiest of the, no, they're all bright and pretty. Golden nape tanager, golden tanagers. I mean, I've tried putting a banana out here. I don't get anything. Crimson rump toucanet, showing off his crimson rump. And this is two canets. Golden-headed quetzal, not as gaudy as the resplendent, but very handsome in its own right. Masked trogon. Crested guan, so our second guan. Oopsie, come back here, tawny bellied hermit. The hermits are lovely. They have curved bills that fit into flowers, especially heliconias, and but they'll come to the feeders too. They can handle getting that. So here's a little trail maintenance going on. We're heading down another extremely muddy trail. This is Angel taking some worms down so that we tourists can look down and see Willie, the yellow-breasted antpitta. And we had red-headed barbets, the female on the right. I think the male looks to me like Angry Bird. And toucan barbet, who looks like all of the birds put together into one. Red-faced spinetail, palm tanagers. Some of the birds you have to sort of do a double take to figure out which one you're looking at. The blue-winged mountain tanager and the black-chin mountain tanager can kind of cover for each other. And a few more of the bright boys hanging out looking for mostly bananas. This is one of my favorites. I think this bird looks so handsome. Looks almost plush with a lovely feathering. And the paparazzi. This is the chestnut-crowned antpitta. It's very fond of worms. And this one is one of my favorites. She's pretty little. She has pretty short sticks for her egg body. But this bird, if you ever see a video of them, she sort of shakes her body almost in a barrel-like motion where her wings are going side to side, and they called her Shakira because of her dance moves. Rufous-breasted ant thrush. And these are all birds we would have next to no chance of seeing if we were out there looking for them by ourselves. So this is our group. On the far left here is Edison, and then Kathy and Angel, Charlie in the back, Rodrigo. This is Angel's son who helped organize a fundraising process. Lorna, Eric, me, and this is, I think, another. I think this is Rodrigo's son. They always take pictures of these, and I was messaging with a friend who lives in Panama to try to get him connected with them for their fundraising purposes. And I said that we were visiting the antpittas, and he said, "Oh yeah, I think I saw your picture on their Facebook page." This is the picture that you saw on the Facebook page. So they, the matriarch of the family that owned the farm where they have the antpitta habitat passed away a little while ago. There were 7 siblings, and 5 of them wanted to sell the land to basically for cattle farming, which would have meant cutting down all the trees. And Angel and Rodrigo didn't want to do that. So they worked together with their son, and a lot of the people who have been there before set up a GoFundMe page, and they were able to buy out the other 5 siblings. So it will be kept as a habitat for antpittas and other related birds, which is it's a fabulous, wonderful story. So I went to another bird sanctuary, which has been there for quite a while. And we had some more banana mania, pretty wild banana mania. So here's another match pairs of try to figure out which one you're looking at. Orange-bellied and thick-billed euphonias, and golden tanagers and silver-throated tanagers. And some more variety of tanagers and honey creepers. They're all, the honey creepers in the same family as the tanagers. These are not in the same family. We had Ericeres, the pale manifold or collared, and the choco toucan. And I had to throw in another picture of the toucan because he's just so handsome standing there. He's just too good. One of my favorite hummingbirds, we saw this in Costa Rica and Panama as well, the white-necked Jacobin. And green thorntail was kind of fun with these sort of funky tail feathers. And when he flips his tail up, then he's sticking him up in the air. They're just really pretty amazing. And another hermit, this is the white-whiskered orange-billed sparrow and Rufus motmot. So those of us who get emails from us, this is a cousin of the motmot for whom we named our email. We had agouti. They will always be on the ground if there's bananas in the neighborhood. Went back to the lodge and saw purple-bibbed white tip. So you have a front and a back view there. You can see the white tip. And fawn-breasted brilliant. It's not one of the more brilliant of the brilliants, but it's related to the other brilliant, so it's a brilliant. Rufous-tailed hummingbird, also rufous-billed hummingbird, but booted racket tail. This is so cute. See his little feathery boots and his long tail that ends in a racket. They're just amazing structures on these birds. The Andean emerald on the right, very more delicately colored hummingbird. The velvet-breasted coronet is not delicately colored. And then, oh no, another of us in quarantine for a day, 2 days. So we went, leaving her behind, went to Amagusa and moss-backed tanager, also a banana fan. Flame-faced tanager, literally eating out of our hands. The glistening green tanagers, I think, were just amazing. They looked unreal. They were so green, so beautiful. And the birds on the right are female and male flame-rumped tanagers. Now, usually I associate flame colors like orange red. And apparently this used to be the lemon-rumped tanager, but they went to flame-rumped, and I think they misnamed it. Another banana mania, and getting a little pushy over here on the right. This is kind of nice, the two velvet-breasted coronets posing next to each other so you could see both sides at the same time. And one of the loveliest of the hummingbirds, I think, was the violet-tailed sylph. And so on the left, we have a female thorntail and the violet-breasted coronet, and on the right is an empress brilliant. And this is how they keep the birds coming back to the orange flowers. They spray the orange flowers with sugar water, and the hummingbirds have figured out where the sugar water comes from. So they come in and zooming in to help themselves to it. We went for a little stroll and saw uniformed tree hunter, which is another bird that's usually skulking, but he came out to the edge of the road and let us get a good look at him. And we had orange-breasted fruit eater, ornate flycatchers, cute little things. It's a much more cryptic wedge-billed wood creeper. And then this is a common potu and her baby. You see the little lump over here, that's the bill and the eyes of the baby potu. And it's kind of snuggled up under mom's feathers. And I'm not sure I would have figured that out if I hadn't been told myself. And to get this picture, we climbed up a ladder that the host nicely provided for us so that we could get eye level view because they were about that far off the ground. You tell them what a potu is, dear.
They're one of the nightjar type birds, nocturnal insect eaters that blend so perfectly with their surroundings. They appear in the daytime and you never see them.
Unless you're lucky and they show up in somebody's backyard on a stick. So I saw a coatimundi. I thought, oh, neat, a coati, oh, wonderful. And then we realized it's a banana lover too. So it comes for its bananas. So we have Banana Mania 6 going on there. And rose-faced parrot. And this is a white-tipped sickle bill, and it puts the curve of the hermit hummingbird to shame. It's so curved. And again, ideally suited for heliconias. And I was really glad that it backed off enough that I was able to get a view of the bill, because it's just amazing. And a little more potty humor. Haipu just seemed like such a perfect name for a toilet. And saw these butterflies on a pole and saw butterflies flying in. And these are one of the species of the Hamadryas butterfly, or cracker butterfly. They make a cracking sound when they fly off the perch. So we went to the oilbird cave, which wasn't really a cave. It was really an open, narrow canyon. I had stairs provided, which is fortuitous. And then we had oilbirds. They're called oilbirds because they have a high body oil content, and they used to catch them and boil them for their oil so they could light lamps with them.
And we get it from reading on the bomb.
Yeah, they're fruit eaters. They eat palm nuts and things. That's where the oil, but they're also related to they're night feeders, so they hide out in the cave during the day. And this is really cool because the other time we'd seen them, they were in a dark cave, and it was really kind of hard to see them, and they were sort of creepy looking. But in the daylight, they were much prettier. So we went to Rio Salanche and the Salanche Reserve Tower. Picked up a few more, like every day was like 30 to 50 or 60 species of birds. Social flycatcher, gray-breasted martins, and Pacific hornero. The Guayaquil woodpecker with the, I think probably takes the cake for the best hairdo of all the birds we saw. Orange-fronted barbet, credit goes to Charlie on that picture too. And cinnamon becard, or Beckard, depending on, Eric says it's Beckard, so it's Beckard. Rusty margined flycatcher and broad-billed motmot, another cousin. These were all from the tower. We were up at, well, not quite eye level, obviously, of the flycatcher, but many of the birds we were looking at. Blue-tailed trogon, and then the white-tailed trogons, the two pictures on the right. If it's got its back to you, you might go, I'm not sure who that is, but if it turns around, you see the white tail, you can figure it out.
And the Bruin color.
Yeah, Bruin colors, Eric says. Gray and gold tanager, there's actually some gold on the chest feathers here, this pretty one. And scarlet dacnus was, I think, one of the most spectacular of the little birds that we saw. So we went back to Puemba, where 5 of the 6 of us tested positive for COVID. But our next 2 hotels said we could come along as long as we quarantine. So off we went, first to Antisana, the Antisana Reserve. On the way, we had a view of Cotopaxi. And we stopped at a little restaurant called Tambo Condor. Or at least it's called that when it's not covered up by flowers. But these flowers would be ideal for the sword-billed hummingbird or for the giant hummingbird. And we had black flower piercer, another species, our 5th species of flower piercer. Shining sunbeam. Condors and caracaras. Indian condor on the right there.
Bigger than our cup.
Yes, bigger than our condors.
Yeah.
And the black-chested buzzard eagle, very handsome bird, and the giant hummingbird,
Which is the largest.
which is the largest hummingbird. Its body size is kind of like the size of a swallow. When it's flying, you have to kind of do a double take to figure out it's a hummingbird, but it will stick that bill all the way up one of those bell-shaped flowers that we were looking at before. And on our way to Antisana, we saw, this is a landmark, I guess. Obviously has some graffiti on it, or street art or whatever you want to call it. But the nice thing was it made sort of a focal point for us to see some birds, such as the Ecuadorian hill star and the chestnut-winged syncloides. We had adult and immature carunculated caracaras and caracara in flight. Very handsome bird. This is Antisana. Often difficult to see because of cloud cover. We did get a pretty good peek at it, but this is at 12,000 feet, 13,000 feet. It was pretty chilly and pretty breezy. And Quito, even though it's chilly all the time, never gets snow. The snow only goes down to about 10,000 feet. I mean, snow only goes down to about, I think, 14,000 feet, something like that. It's just, you don't really, snow's only really high. So we saw some deer. We actually saw some llamas, but they were like a 2-second flash past the bus. But we did see some wild ones, so that was kind of cool. And the Andean gull, which we also saw flying way high over us when we were at the hotel near Quito. Some of the growing things, botanical things, variable hawk, Plumbeus serafinch, male and female. Long ways away, we saw a yellow-billed pintail, but you couldn't prove it by our view of them. And slate-colored coot was a little bit easier to understand the name. This is just a shot of the paramo, which is the high flat grasslands that are characteristic of only found in the Andes. It's a very interesting habitat that is largely grassland. It falls between timberline and snowline, and has its own plants and animals and birds. So on the way back to Puembo, a couple pictures I took out the windows were going by, but we weren't going back to Puembo. We were going to go on to our hotel, except our guide started feeling bad. And we stopped at a pharmacy, and he had his temperature taken, and he had a fever, and he started feeling worse. And so we took him home, and somehow they couldn't find another guide who was willing to take 5 COVID people around the country. So we ended up going back to the hotel, where we had to quarantine and eat in our rooms. So we played with the dogs. Princess and Sunflower belonged to the sister of the owner of the hotel. They're the sweet little English sheepdogs there. And that puppy is their friend who goes walking with them in the morning. I think this might be a new breed of dog. On the left is the alpaca dog, on the right is a real alpaca, but looks pretty similar to me. And we played with the hotel kitty. And we watched a girl have the most fun ever at her first communion celebration. I don't think her mom would have appreciated these pictures. We watched the grass grow and watched the alpacas mow. Explored every corner of the grounds more than once. We watched them prepping the roses in the rose cutting shed. And they allowed us to explore the adjacent farm. Unfortunately, our road was kind of limited by mud, so we went walking around a field and watched people working, watched dogs watching people working. We saw a calf being born, and I think she looks amazingly like her mother's, got the same eye patch shape. And did a little more bird watching, another sparkling violet ear. I love the way that the chest sparkles on that bird. So American kestrels. There's a lady vermilion flycatcher. Harris's hawk, a couple of flybys. Black vultures were pretty constant. A cinereous conebill we saw once. Blue and white swallows were everywhere. In fact, they were nesting under the tiles of some of the buildings. And we had a crimson mantled woodpecker at the top of a tree. Charlie got a good picture of its belly, and I got a pretty good picture there on the right of its back. But that too was a one-timer. Tropical mockingbirds, great thrushes, and eared doves were all the time. Rusty flower piercer, it's I think the prettiest of the flower piercers. Golden grosbeak and blue-gray tanagers. Saffron finches a couple of times, and on the upper right is a scrub tanager.
It's feeding on Eugenia. Probably grow so often as a hedge. These were, and the fruit was much larger, but that was the main food source for the birds in the hotel.
It was very popular. We don't know the species of the Eugenia, but we'll be looking for it. But we sort of felt like the scrub tanager was kind of an underwhelming name for a bird with so many pretty colors on it, but nobody asked us. So finally, on the departure day, the go home day for some of us and the off day between trips for others, we got one more morning of great Ecuadorian birding at Guango Lodge by way of it should be Papayacta Pass, but Edison said that in Ecuador, they say Papayacta Pass. So anyway, it's a tall pass, the tallest paved road pass in the world, I think. That's what they tell us. So we're looking over at the side of the pass here, and right in the middle of it, there's an Andean condor. And then it got up and it went flying. So that was lovely, even though it was a ways away. We were watching for spectacled bears. We did not see anything other than signs alerting us to their potential presence. So we finally got to Guango Lodge, and we had more wonderful new hummingbirds, long-tailed sylph and chestnut-breasted coronet, tourmaline sun angel, and the white-bellied wood star. Looking up, sometimes you would see things like spectacled redstarts and cinnamon flycatchers, if you could tear your eye away from the hummingbirds. Collared Inca and a dive here, and the long-tailed sylph, incredible, beautiful iridescent feathers. Green jay and turquoise jay. And now for something completely different. Everyone else headed back home, and Ron and Eric and I went to the Galapagos for a Galapagos cruise. And the airports in Galapagos are the first ever ecologic airports. And they're ecologic because they make sure you don't bring anything that will be a problem for the islands. And they even have canines that go sniffing around luggage to make sure you're not bringing any food or seeds or anything. Whoopsie. And then this off to the right was just the scenery around the airport. There's not much shade in much of Ecuador, not very many trees, but there's tall cactuses in the Galapagos. Yes. So we went down to the marina there and got on board the Archipel 2, Archipel 2, Archipel 1. There's actually an Archipel 2 that's now owned by somebody else. They used to be owned by the same company, but now they're not owned by the same persons. But it was a lovely boat, up to 16 people, double occupancy. And you can see the room on the right, that was our room, and we had a double bed. Well, when they brought in the suitcases, and there wasn't any room for the people, but fortunately there was room to slide the suitcases underneath the bed. So we were able to get to the bathroom, which was helpful. And the upper deck, and then in the middle here, grandkids of one of our travelers for the second part of the trip, getting a workout on the deck by lifting chairs. Anything to get your exercise in. So a quick look at some of the staff members. On the left in this group picture is our guide, Victor Hugo. Alejandro was our bartender and food server and general, anything that you wanted to have done, you asked Alejandro and he would fix it for us. Coco was the chef. Where's Captain? Well, Captain Eric's over here on the right. When we came back, especially in the afternoons, they would always have some snacks and some beverages out for us. And one of the people said they always seem to know whether we're going to need a cold drink or a hot drink. And I said, yeah, I think they've been doing this for a while. They figured it out. But we had the food was fabulous and nothing to complain about. So every day we would get a daily briefing about what we would be doing the next day. And we would get lectures on the national park rules. We got lectures on the geology of the Galapagos, on the ecology of the Galapagos, on the marine life, quite a number of informational things. So we're now actually on the part of Santa Cruz Island and doing a little sand walk. I like that pelican on the left. He's a brown pelican like our pelicans, just does not look like he wants to be bothered. Sally Lightfoot crabs, nobody's really quite sure how they got the name. One of the silly suggestions I saw was Gordon Lightfoot's sister, but I don't think that's true. But apparently there was a woman who worked in a lot of bars in the Caribbean, and her name was Sally Lightfoot. So they think maybe that's why, because she moved fast and they moved fast. So who knows? Our first Galapagos warbler, which is a subspecies of the yellow warbler. This is a female. They were probably our most constant perching bird. And our first marine iguana. There were greater flamingos there. And ground finches are one of the famous Darwinian finches. And there's large, medium, and small ground finches, pretty much based on the size of their bills. Unfortunately, our tour was not a bird watching tour, so we tried to sort of figure this out on our own. But this to me looks like medium, so I decided it was question mark a medium ground finch. And then on the left, similar looking bird with a small bill. So I think that's a small ground finch. Lava lizards, we saw several in a couple of different species. The females tend to be striped, the males are more gaudy. But we saw lots of things named Galapagos and lots of things named lava, because that's what there's a lot of. So the lava heron it's actually a striated heron, but in the Galapagos, they like to call it a lava heron. Seen several places.
It looks like our green heron.
Yes, a close relative. I've never seen a sandman quite like this before. I was impressed. And so then we're off for a night of boating to our next destination. We're heading for, I can't actually read here, Genovesa. This is about a 6 or 7 hour cruise at night. And this is an aerial black and white of Genovesa. It's an old, everything in the Galapagos is a volcano or was a volcano. And this is one from some time ago with a nice big nice big bay there. In the morning, we did a walk along the red dotted lines in the lower right part. And then we did a dinghy cruise along the cliffs. And then there's a sandy beach down in the lower left part of that open bay where we went in the afternoon and saw more birds. And I lost my cursor again. There we go. Come here, cursor. Okay. So fairly steep cliffs. Apparently, Prince Philip visited the Galapagos in 1965, and they named these steps after him. I'm guessing they made the steps for him, and I don't think there's been a whole lot of change in them since 1965. It was a fairly good climb to get up onto the plateau on the top. But once we got there, we started seeing really cool things like great frigate birds. There's both great and magnificent frigate birds. Deer doesn't, when I tried to figure this out, they said great frigate birds have green backs and the immatures have cinnamon on their fronts. And every bird I took a picture of matches great frigate bird. But we'll just call it frigate bird for now. But anyway, cute kids. The Galapagos dove and the Galapagos mockingbird, which is the mockingbird on most of the islands. There's a couple of other species besides, but this is the most common one. This I would call a large ground finch. Looks like it could crack anything with that bill. And we saw red-footed boobies, like my red-footed booby. And about one, and I misread that. It's 1 in 10 red-footed boobies are actually white, but most of them are brown. We got up on the top of the plateau, and we just saw thousands of these storm petrels flying around. And I caught a couple of them. They are wedge-rumped storm petrels. They actually nest on that upper flat area, but that makes them a little bit in burrows on the flat area. But they're being watched by short-eared owl. Ron found this for us. It's pretty cool because we heard they could be there, but he spotted it lurking down there. I think it probably already eaten because it wasn't paying any attention to all the birds flying by it. Lava cactus. And then we go birding along the cliffs from a dinghy. Upper left is the swallow-tailed gull with a baby. Really lovely gull. And the upper right is an immature coming in for a landing. Down at the bottom are 2 adults thinking about more immatures.
It's another nocturnal species.
Yes, in fact, when we left Genovesa and went to the next island, was my one bad seasick night of the trip. And sitting on the back of the boat, we could see them flying alongside the boat in the dark. That's pretty cool. Whoops, I'm going backwards. So here's a red-footed booby on a tentative perch on the cliff. And we had red-billed tropic birds on the left and yellow-crowned night herons on the right. And this is a little cutie. We saw many, many sea lions, and this is a sea lion, but it's called a Galapagos fur seal. It's not a true seal, it's a sea lion, but they have shorter snouts than the big sea lions do, and they prefer to hop up on the rocks because they're small enough to get up there easily. as opposed to the sea lions generally will beach themselves on sand. So this isn't a true sea lion, but they call it fur seal, and just to make things confusing. So this is a young one. Cattle egret. There are no cows, but never mind. So afternoon beach walks and what our guide called Mickey Mouse snorkeling, which is easy off the beach snorkeling. So we have another swallowtail gull with its baby. And here's a male frigate bird displaying, and how long does it take him to puff that up? Takes several hours to puff up that whole pouch. We were there near the end of the breeding season, but it didn't stop some of them from showing off. So they puff up their pouch and then they lean their head back to show it off and spread their wings out to show how long their wings are if they see a female fly over. So this is all done for somebody passing by who probably doesn't care. This is the Nazca booby, and this pair has bonded, and they're in the process of making a little nest site there. The Nazca's nest on the ground and the blue-footed nest on the ground, but the red boobies and the frigate birds like to nest in bushes. So the bird on the left there has a stick that it's getting approval to put down to their nest is really more in theory than actuality. It's not too much of a nest. Now this is a quiz bird because it's white like a Nazca, but it's got red feet. So this is one of the white red-footed boobies. They're very pretty. So here's the sea lions. You see a longer snout, bigger animals. The upper left picture, the sea lion on the right was a young male. Actually, I think the one that's farther over to the right as well. And he thought this female probably wanted his attention, but she said she didn't. So she chased him back in the water. And a mama and baby down below. This is our guide, Victor Hugo, giving us an anatomy lesson on the beach. And then we had our overnight of seasickness for one of us, and bless Eric's heart, he stayed with me the whole time I was sitting on the back of the boat. We eventually went back inside, but it was a tough night, but fortunately the only one. So we went to Bartolome and Santiago Islands. So this is Bartolome, and you see the peak up there at the top of the hill. The goal was to get up there by climbing all these stairs. 375 steps according to our guide, but Eric said there were 3 steps before he got to 375, so there were really 378. But as this was the morning after my seasick night, I think I was probably dehydrated from that. I didn't make it to the top, but Victor had some pictures he shared with me of the stairs going up to the top, and the view from the top of the islands is quite spectacular. So that's Santiago Island beyond. We have another lava lizard, and I really like the little, this is like a 4-inch tall shrub, but it looked like a natural bonsai to me. And this rock is part of Bartolome as well. And we had one Galapagos penguin, so I took as many pictures as I could, but we were on a dinghy that was turning in circles so that everybody could see the penguin, and so getting a picture was a little more challenging than I would have preferred, but we saw it. I got the picture. Here's blue-footed boobies aerobatics. The Galapagos hawk, which is a relative of, is actually is it a red tail?
It's a red tail. Oh, they're right.
It's very similar to our red tails. We saw only a couple of them. This one and one that was kind of hidden on a nest. So on Santiago, we did what I call the lava walk, where we walked over lava from a relatively recent eruption. It's from the late 1980s.
Mhm.
So actually quite recent. So this really, we mostly were in the central and eastern islands, which are the older ones, but this eruption was much more recent than most of the rocks that we looked at. So here we're getting a lava talk. Victor really liked to talk about geology and lava and rocks. And over on the right, you can see where the lava stopped, and there was dirt that didn't get covered by it. And so we hiked across the dirt, the rocks. And everywhere that we went, there would be a trail that was marked that we were required to stay on. Sometimes a little more challenging than others. And on the right is, I have no idea how this developed. It was just part of the lava, but it just looked quite artistic to me, like a fossilized egg or something. And here's our group, this is our first group. Was a pretty interesting, this couple over on the left were from Israel. They were Orthodox Jews. So the only thing they ate on board was fresh fruit they could prepare themselves. And most of the rest of the people that were on that tour were from Europe. The couple over here on the right actually preceded us on the boat by a few days and stayed through the first part of our trip. They're from Poland. We're very lovely people. He's a OBGYN doctor, so that was kind of nice. Actually, they're both doctors. I'm not sure what her specialty was. And then this is Alejandro. Alejandro's job was to help me get over the rocks. He did a really good job of that. And then nighttime again, and we're off to Santa Cruz Island and Puerto Ayora. Much shorter, much calmer trip. So this is Giant Tortoises Day. So we're going to go visit the giant tortoises. So we went to El Chato Ranch, where you get your botas at the Boots house.
It's up in the highlands and it's much taller trees, it's much greener, they get much more rain.
And it drizzled on us part of the morning. So we had to put on boots so that we didn't track any bad stuff out by the tortoises. And they had giant tortoises just wandering around freely. In fact, there was one that was in the road that we had to wait a little bit to get out of the way for the bus. And a nice mud hole for the tortoises. I think the tortoise on the right, I sort of feel like he looks like somebody with spinach in their teeth, that somebody needs to tell him his breakfast is visible.
They actually migrate and they move from that area to lower lands, but it takes about a year.
And white-cheeked pintail on the left and black-necked stilt on the right. And more, the bird on the upper right is the male yellow warbler. Really pretty. It reminds me of the mangrove yellow warbler. And tortoises can have bugs on them too, so they check out everybody for bugs. And this is I think these are small-billed ground finches. The one on the left is feasting on tortoise poop with seed in it, and the one on the right is waiting for people food. We went into a lava tunnel. Pretty dramatic down there. And then we visited the Charles Darwin Scientific Station. These monitors, they don't move very fast. So this is the breeding center of giant tortoises. I think the tortoise on the left looks exhausted from breeding. All stretched out there. On the right are some baby tortoises. They're probably like 10 years old. There's some neat different giant cacti. On the left is candelabra cactus. And they had the tortoises separated into different pens. I think they probably could have caught them if they wanted to, but. And then as we were walking back into town, saw this sign for Chocolapagos, chocolate, with a live chocolate show. We didn't make a reservation, but it would have been interesting to find out what a live chocolate show looked like. Then as we're going back, we passed this place where they were preparing fish that had been brought in by the fishermen, and some of the interested participants included brown pelicans, great blue heron on the left, the swallow-tailed gull in the middle, and down on the right, you could see how tiny the lava or striated heron is, but always looking for a morsel.
This is only one of two places that has a permanent population. Just like us, water is a scarcity. Most islands don't have a permanent water supply.
He's talking about a people population. There's only a couple of two cities, which are small cities, and a couple of small towns. This was, I think, was supposed to be a skateboard ramp, but the kids were having fun just sliding down it on their jeans. And there were you're not supposed to bother the animals, so when a sea lion decides to plop down on the sidewalk, they put up orange cones, and I watched somebody almost walk into the sea lion anyway. And They like benches and they like boats. Yeah, this is fun. We had a changeover of staff that everybody on the boat left except for Ron and Eric and me. And we got in a new influx of people. And we had a couple from Minneapolis and a grandma from Rochester and her two youngest grandkids, all from Minnesota. They'd never met before and they came on the boat together. And then about the second morning or the first morning that they were on board, the two ladies walked out wearing the same shirt. And then they realized they were reading the same book, which is about the Galapagos. So I took a picture of what I call the Minnesota twins. And both of them had those shirts for about 10 years, didn't remember where they got them, but loved them. It was just kind of a funny coincidence. Of course, having 5 people walk on the boat are all from Minnesota was kind of interesting too. So now we're going down to Floriana Island. And we see more flamingos. And we get our first really good looks at blue-footed boobies. And blue-footed boobies are very attractive to blue feet. So they like to show off their blue feet, especially to other blue-footed boobies. And the one on the right, I think, is trying to demonstrate that it not only has blue feet, but has lots of other desirable characteristics as well. It's part of the attraction activity. And they crossed bills a bit. We had a Galapagos flycatcher finally. Ron had seen one earlier. This is in the Myarchus genus, so it was kind of a thrill. This, I think, is a young bird, but it was a Galapagos flycatcher and we saw it. Some of the vegetation, some of the islands had a fair amount of vegetation. This is an interesting structure called the Devil's Crown. It looked like part of a crater where most of it had crumbled away. Pretty deep water out there, and that was what Victor called Rambo level snorkeling. Not for the faint of heart. Also some of the folks did a bit of kayaking around Floriana. We had a Wimbrel, which surprised us, and then we had a Ruddy Turnstone. We thought, where are we? Marina del Rey? And then we had this octopus. You can see the eye of the octopus right there and the legs coming down like this. It actually was out about here on the water, on the rock when we first saw it. And then when it saw that we saw it, it started back in, which is when I got this picture. But apparently they will, if there's something interesting to eat out there, they will come out of the water and eat it. So that was pretty cool. The 2 storm petrels that we saw most often, the Elliots or white rumped. No, yeah, white banded, something like that. And then the wedge rumped storm petrel, which is a little bit larger, and the white comes down almost to the tip of the tail on it. But they were common around the boat. Kind of a neat lighting picture there of just hopefully deciduous trees. A couple more pictures of yellow warblers. They took their business off to the sand after they finished yelling at each other. We visited Post Office Bay, which has been there for 100 years, longer. And this old barrel, and people come and they put postcards in it. And then other people come along and sort through the postcards and pick out ones that are maybe reasonably close to where they live to take them back and deliver them. And we picked up several. We have some for people out in the valley, and we're going down to San Diego next month. We'll deliver some for people in San Diego when we go down there. But and then you just put them all back, and then somebody else comes along and see if they see one that's kind of reasonably close to them. And there's one couple that was from the Netherlands, and there was one that was addressed to somebody in the town, I think where she'd grown up or near it, and she didn't recognize the name, but she knew the town really well. So that's kind of a fun geography trip as well. And the beaches were some of them absolutely gorgeous, nice white sand beaches, but the water's cold. And this is Liv, one of the grandkids, and she didn't touch, but she had a sea lion swimming around her one evening. That was kind of fun. And some pretty nice sunsets. So now we're off to Española Island, which used to be called Hood Island. And on Hood Island is the hood mockingbird. And this is, I think, one of the most aggressive of the mockingbirds are basically carnivores, and they will do that. So they have the hood or Espanola mockingbird on the left, and then on the right, it's harassing and poking at and picking up and flipping around a baby green sea turtle, which would really just like to get in the water. And this went on for quite a while. A whole bunch of pictures we were finding just got like too upsetting, and we walked away. And when we came back, the mockingbird had gone away, and the baby sea turtle was heading for the ocean. And it actually made it to the ocean and out into the water. So that was, it had, you're not supposed to do anything to interfere with nature at all, but I think our standing around kept the mockingbird away. And a lady sort of smoothed the sand out in front of it to make it easier for it to get to the beach, but we didn't touch it, so we follow the rules.
Lots of cheering.
Lots of cheering for the turtle, that's for sure. And the folks who every day on the boat, and sometimes twice on some days, they would have snorkeling trips, which we didn't participate in. Eric, because he's not fond of cold water, and me because my only symptom from getting COVID was coughing, which didn't seem like a good thing to do when you're snorkeling. So I didn't get to snorkel, but they saw hammerhead sharks, and they saw rays, and they saw colorful fish and sea lions. And I don't think they ever saw any iguanas, but they had some amazing dive trips. This was funny. On the right is Victor, our Galapagos guide, and on the right is Edison, on the left is Edison, our Ecuadorian guide, who was leading another tour of bird watchers to the Galapagos at the same time that we were doing our Galapagos tour. I kind of wanted to borrow his brain to get us the more bird identification while we were there, but we had to leave him behind. And this was, I'm amused by heavy shirt, long sleeve shirt, shorts, and bare feet. This seems to be the typical clothing of the guides. So here's Eric in conversation with a mockingbird. And now, Ron, we're supposed to stay 6 feet away from the wildlife, although sometimes the wildlife doesn't pay attention to that. So, lava rock beaches. These are called Christmas marine iguanas because they have sort of a red and kind of greenish color to them. They look to me more like Dia del Muerte than they do like Christmas, but that's my interpretation. We had Galapagos oyster catchers, which are a subspecies of the American oyster catcher. And this is a baby sea lion who was lying on the beach and crying, and we thought, oh dear. Well, finally mama came and took care of baby's needs. This is the male Espanola lava lizard. I think the only male lizard we saw, unfortunately, because they're pretty loud. And our waved albatross. This is one of our featured birds, just big, beautiful bird. And they're called waved albatrosses because of the wavy lines on their chest here. Sort of reminds me of the front of a gadwall, that sort of wavy markings. Very, very handsome birds. And this is the hood or Espanola mockingbird again. You see it standing by a large egg. That's actually a albatross eggs. So you can see the eggs are really big. They're just big. I mean, the mockingbird could get in there. And in fact, the mockingbird was getting in there and eating what used to be a baby albatross, which is unfortunate because the albatrosses don't lay eggs very often. And so any loss is tough on the albatross population, but I guess the mockingbirds have to eat too. So we saw some courting behavior between the albatrosses, and it was pretty amazing. I think they look like they're playing rock, paper, scissors. But this is how they recognize each other is by doing their mutual dance. All right. So I haven't practiced my videography with my big camera yet. And this was, we thought they were finished and started to walk away and turn around. No, they weren't finished. Now we're making baby albatrosses. So that was pretty exciting. And then a thank you kiss afterwards is kind of sweet. And a blue-footed booby admiring its blue feet. And an albatross nesting in the middle of the trail, which means that people go around the trail. And you'll notice over on the right, Victor's barefoot on the lava rocks as well. We did some serious climbing over rocks here. He gave us an iguana lecture. And then the next day off to San Cristobal Island. Oops. Climbed up a fairly steep little canyon to get up onto the top of San Cristobal. Oops, I'm going the wrong way again. And is it Papa Blue-footed Doobie with two kids, one almost as big as Daddy, and the other one was a little smaller, but quite independent and went off on its own little walk, stretching its legs and checking things out. So this is the plateau they got on the top, and the red is sea purslane or carpetweed. Very pretty. Ron's admiring the vegetation there. Wearing his Adopta t-shirt. Sphinx moth. We had brown noddy, which is a tern relative. And this sea lion found its niche. Fit just perfectly. And then these are the grandkids and their castle that they built. We had like an hour on the beach, and so they set to making a really elaborate castle.
They're the ones that built this, no, the family.
Did they make? Oh, they did. I didn't know that. And this is called the Boot for a pretty good reason. And we were there on Father's Day, so the chefs made a Father's Day celebration cake. And then our last morning we went to Isla Lobos, walked on rocks again, saw more baby frigate birds. Now this one looks more like a magnificent because it doesn't have the cinnamon feather covering. And mama and baby sea lions, they nurse for a long time. This one has a fishing line or something around it, and Victor tried to kind of get the baby away a little bit to see if he could cut it away, but mom wouldn't let him, so he was going to let the rangers know about it. More blue-footed booby families. Lava gull, which is the color of lava. And so we got back on the dinghy and back to the boat and back to town and the airport. So the blue-footed booby said goodbye to us. But the adventure wasn't over yet. So on our drive from the Quito airport back to the hotel for the night, we ran into a protest by the indigenous people, which had actually started the day that we left for the Galapagos. And they were protesting the price of gas and the just general cost of living, and wanted the government to do more about helping it. Now, the price of regular gas, it was about $2.50 a gallon. So it's a little hard to sympathize, except that it had gone up like by almost 100% in a short period of time. So it's pretty dramatic for them. So they blockaded much of the city of Quito, but it really hadn't affected us too much, except coming back from the airport, the road that we took to go to the hotel is a right-hand turn just beyond where these people are standing. So they effectively blocked it for us, and we went, Diego was driving us, he took us back around another way, and we tried to come from the other side, it was blocked too. So we came back here, and a tour bus came up next to us, which was driven by a friend of Diego's, and they started talking about, okay, what can we do about this? And someone on the sidewalk said, oh, you could take the road, I think it was the road to Tuemba or something like that. And they said, oh yeah, the road to Tuemba, let's do it. And so I took a picture of Diego's phone, and you can see the little turquoise line that that we're heading for then there. What it turned out to be was a fairly steep canyon with a dirt road. We started out in cobblestone and it turned into dirt, and it went down one side of the canyon and across a little river and back up the other side of the canyon. And we were following the tour bus. It was in some places only the bus could get through. As you can see, there's a car coming on the left of the bus, and then a rather large truck came by, and we were Diego's getting us kind of as far over behind the bus as possible here, and the trucks kind of, like, literally inches. And there were places where they probably could not have passed each other on that road. There were a couple of fairly sharp hairpin turns where the bus had to make like a 4-point turn to get around the curve because it was so tight. But we did ultimately get back, and it took a little over 2 hours to do what normally would have been a 20-minute trip. So that was quite an adventure. And then the next morning, we drove out on the same road because they were still up at the intersection. And this is out the bus window, a picture of the canyon that we, you could see off to the right, it drops down there quite a bit. It was quite dramatic. But the ultimate is all you need is Ecuador. It was a wonderful trip. We're sorry we missed the birds that we missed, but we made, had a wonderful time with what we did, and there's more to go back to. And that is that.
Could you do it again? Wow, that's a lot of. How many birds did you miss?
Lots.
Because you were sick.
Oh, well, we missed 3 lodges where we would have had feeders and hummingbirds, and there was an owl that we would have, San Isidro owl we could have seen. I don't want to think too much about the ones we missed. We did very well with the ones we had, and it was a spectacular trip, and I highly recommend it. Now, what I would recommend for sure, if you go to Ecuador, is to take, they use the American dollar, and especially when we were in quarantine and we wanted to tip the people who were delivering room service to us, we ran out of, we were using mostly Susan, Sacagawea dollar coins because they last longer than paper coins. And we kept running out, and we go up to the front desk and they wouldn't have any either. That was very frustrating. So I recommend taking a good supply of dollar coins with you, or bills. I mean, I'll take bills too. And then on the airport, on our way out of the Galapagos, we keep fading away here. We found a blue-footed booby plush toy, and they also had, this is the only one I saw on our whole trip, a red-footed booby plush toy. So we have our plush toys to go with us.
Can you recommend the guide who, you mentioned the guide, did you go with a tour, or how did you get in touch with the guides?
Well, he has several of our friends, including Martin Beihauer, have traveled with Edison before, and we'd heard really good things about him. So I emailed him way back in 2019, and he said, sure, we can take you and your friends on a tour. And so he and Diego have their own company now called Sword-Billed Expeditions. They do trips to Ecuador, Galapagos, Peru, Colombia, Costa Rica, no, not Costa Rica, Cuba, Argentina, Brazil, Panama, and he also does photographic tours. And if you, their website is swordbilledexpeditions.com. You can see some pretty fabulous photos and tour itineraries. So if they have a time space for you, and you have a group that want to go, then they can arrange that. It's pretty spectacular. In fact, they've offered us a tour in Colombia next April, but I think probably we'll go someplace else first, but maybe get back there one of these days.
Yep. Very good presentation, Ann and Eric.
Yeah, and Ron, you missed most of it. I'm so sorry you didn't get to see all those. Ron was stuck in quarantine the longest of all of us, so he had a tough time.
Only 10 days.
Yeah, only 10 days. Ron got to know the sheepdogs really well.
Yes, those were stunning photos. Thank you, Anne.
Yes, they were.
I only took 8,400 pictures. And Charlie said I'm a slacker because he got that many just in Ecuador, but so I narrowed them down a bit for you.
Oh, that's good. So Anne, this is Jan. That's an amazing, you have the most amazing photos always. They're wonderful. You saw so many birds. How long did you have to quarantine with the COVID? I didn't really understand that part of it. That's like,
Well, it was
you know, and by the way, I got to congratulate you. Congratulations on persevering through everything and just like doing it, and it's okay, and go on.
Yep, that's what you got to do. Well, it was very interesting because there weren't really any rules. As I said, when we first when all 5 of the 6 of us tested positive, the hotel said, well, we could come as long as we didn't infect everybody else. So if we just stayed off on our own, that was okay. So we were going off with that intention, except that when our guide got sick, then we didn't have a way to get there. So we ended up back at the hotel. So we basically stayed in our rooms and wore masks when we were outside, but they give us a full range of the grounds and the farm. So even though there weren't that many bird species, at least we could get outside and we could talk to each other and, you know, get a little variety over what was happening in our hotel rooms. But really we were mostly stuck there because we didn't have a place else to go. So we were there from, I guess, Monday to Sunday. And Sunday was the departure day for several people, and that was the last day we got to go down to Guango, because by that time Edison was feeling better and he and Diego took us down there. They originally wanted